you've done lots of investigative research on cults, right? Like,
well, the only other what I would call a cult that I spent time on was the Jonestown cult, Jim Jones, and that was the hardest story and the most wrenching story I ever did.
that was, how long ago was that?
Let's see.
That was in the Jonestown thing was in like was that the early 90s?
Yeah, but it was, excuse me, my story was apropos of the Branch Davidians.
Oh yeah.
And when the Branch Davidian, just before the apocalypse, my editor then was Tina Brown, and she asked me to go to Waco, and cover. And I said, Tina, there are more reporters than Branch Davidians in Waco now, and I just don't see joining the pack.
Right.
But I don't know if you would remember this, but there was a moment before the tanks started poking holes in the building and sending in tear gas and so on. David Koresh sent out a lot of the children, and there were, I don't know, just one or two vans with these kids who went, through the military line, the ATF, the FBI, the press, and then out of the property into a world they didn't know, and they were leaving behind everybody they knew. And their faces were so forlorn. I just remember, they were passing the news cameras, and they just lost little kids. And I thought, well, that must have happened before. And so I started researching, and it turned out that there were survivors of the Jim Jones suicide massacre. Yeah, 3 of them. Well, there were more than that, but there were 3 who were the sons of Jim Jones.
Oh, yeah.
2 of them were adopted, and one, Stephan Jones, was his natural son. And they happened to have been in Georgetown, Guyana, playing basketball with the national team, and leaving their families in the jungle in Jonestown, in the Guianan jungles. And so I got in touch with Stephan, and they had never talked about it. It had been 15 years since the Jonestown debacle, and but this business in Waco brought it all back for them. So I went to, all 3 boys lived in the Bay Area, and I had these intense conversations with them. One of them, Tim, he was a big guy. He could curl 100 pounds in either arm, and he was, very obviously tough guy. But he hadn't, since Jonestown, he hadn't been able to get on an elevator. He had tried to get on a plane, but he made it turn around, which, it never happens unless Godzilla tells you.
Right.
But so he was wounded, and he agreed to talk, but he wanted to do it in a public place so he wouldn't cry. And he wanted to bring his wife along because he was only going to tell the story once, and he wanted her to hear it. So we went to this nice restaurant somewhere around the bay, and after like 10 minutes, he was sobbing and pounding the table, and the waiter made this huge, loop away from the table. Everybody in the restaurant was riveted and looking at their food, and he told a story of. He was the one who was chosen to fly back into Jonestown and identify the bodies of 900 people.
Oh my God.
His wife and children, his parents, his birth parents, his adopted parents, his friends, everybody he knew, his children. He had children he had to identify, and
God.
I was never more impressed with the power of belief that it would lead to such a colossal tragedy.
And were they supposed to be there?
Yeah, they were, and their attendance at the basketball game was very controversial in the Jonestown community. And they, these boys, they were young men when I talked to them. They bear a lot of guilt because they feel that had they been there, they might have been able to stop it. But I think that's not true. I mean, I don't think it was stoppable. For months, Jones had been training his followers, having these white nights, as they called it, where they would drink what they thought was cyanide and in a Kool-Aid. That's where the phrase comes from, drinking the Kool-Aid.
Right.
And then they'd be fine. So, but in this particular case, Congressman Leo Ryan had just flown down from San Francisco because some of his constituents were worried about relatives that were in Jonestown, and he was killed by some of Jones's followers.
Oh my
and
God.
So it was too late at that point. And Jones knew that trouble was coming his way, and he didn't want to die alone, so he wanted everybody to die with him. He was shot to death, and I guess he refused to take the cyanide. But
Yeah, who shot him?
it was I think it was this woman that was one of his mistresses.
Yeah, what do you think it is about the human mind that creates people like Jim Jones? Like what or not necessarily about the human mind, but maybe it's probably something about people's upbringing and their development. And like how does nature create a Jim Jones type character?
Well, the longing for power is a very human quality, and it manifests in different ways. He was a powerful speaker. He had a way of being, extremely compelling presence. Very dramatic looking man. He was part Cherokee and had very dark complexion and dark eyes, and handsome in a rugged way. He also was a conniver, and he would fake healings and things like that. I think all of this is with the idea of controlling other people. I think you see it in politics. I mean, it's not just religion. You see the longing to exercise control over other people is very powerful. And if you have the capacity that he had to be so compelling as he was, then his only goal was to increase his control. And that was why he moved his whole church out of San Francisco to the jungles of Guyana. And they did it overnight. People would wake up and they'd find their spouse gone, or, the parents had moved away. I mean, it was all secret and done, with amazing security. And they were flown to Guyana, a place that most of them couldn't even put on a map. And then, they lived out their final days in this jungle.
Mm.